First move of the game. Karpov plays e4. Spassky goes with c5. Sicilian defense. All this is normal. e6 is what I play in all of my games. Knight f6, knight c3, d6. I think this is shown engine. Bishop e2, bishop e7. Castles, castles. This looks all very theoretical. 4, knight c6, bishop e3. How do I... There's a way, let me see if I could... Alright, so that's how you do arrows. And that's how you highlight squares. Cool, cool. That's how you make them red. Alright, just pointing out here, because it's a bit different from how you do it on the chess. This is chess base. Okay, well, we got that down. Yeah, so bishop e3. Defending our buddy here on d4, okay? I don't quite know how the theory of this goes, but we have bishop d7 and knight to b3. And the commentator writes that in this position, Spassky initiated a typical plan aimed at yielding stability to his minor pieces. Alright, so he goes with a5, trying to gain space. That's not how you do it. Oh my goodness, I'm messing this up. That's not how you do it. Trying to gain space here. With a4 most likely. So, Karpov. Is this an ad? Oh my goodness.
That is incredible.
Not too much. Too much class? No such thing.
It's Ted Lasso. Everybody says it's a good show. Haven't seen it yet. So Karpov responds with a4. Yeah, not knight takes a5. Come on. a4. And Spassky goes knight to b4. So what Spassky is kind of aiming for is he wants to put this guy over here on c6. Okay? And eventually, I think he wants to go for e5. Alright, so this is kind of like what Spassky's going for. So a5 not only threatens to expand here on the queen side, but kind of gives a good post here for this knight. Okay? So it's kind of what he's going for. So Karpov is seeing that this bishop is coming to c6. I'm going to put pressure here on our buddy on e4. Goes bishop f3. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. I wish there was a way that I could get these arrows. I like these ones that the system recommends. I don't know how to... Pirulo! Calipati. Siempre me traigo la botellita que digo Pirulo. Se va a aparecer aquí hoy. Oh, Pirulo, viste que hice lo del VIP. I figured it out. Spassky continues his plan. Bishop c6. Knight d4 makes a lot of sense. Gunning for that bishop on c6. Plus the knight on b3 is really not... It's not an ideal square for the knight, being completely honest. And Spassky responds with g6 to prepare e5. So this is what we had talked about just a moment ago. Preparing e5, okay? The commentator here says that this is really an idea that black cannot do without. So e5 is going to be necessary. Kind of start striking in the center. Of course, if you were to go e5 immediately here, you're kind of freeing up this square for the knight, right? So knight f5 is not really where you want to have that knight. Hence he goes g6 first. So you can prepare e5 and doesn't have to worry about knight f5. Spassky was a pretty strong player. World champion, what was it, the 12th world champion? I don't know what number it was. He was a world champion. Eventually lost his title to Fischer in what many call the match of the century. I don't know why. It wasn't a good match. Spassky just got destroyed. But alright. Rook f2. Rook f2. Now this might seem like a mysterious move. And our dear commentator writes here, this is a typical Sicilian maneuver where the rook is defending c2. Because rook defends c2 to free the queen, as after black's next move, the central knight will not fulfill this job anymore. But as we will see later, the rook will also fit well into the global regrouping flow. Look at that, global regrouping flow. So since black is going to play e5, and right now this guy is kind of the best defender of c2, he's anticipating that he's going to have to move his knight. He's going to need somebody to defend here. And he's most likely going to bring the rook to d2 is what I'm guessing. It makes a lot of sense to put maybe pressure on d6 along the file. There's really no play on the f file. Nice, I completely forgot to say, but at least he figured it out. Sí, mano, no estaba muy complicado. Lo saqué, ayer te estaba llamando en el stream, like, Pirulo, are you there? Ahora para que me dijera, pero lo saqué rápido. Te queda bien el badge, ¿viste? So there's that. The plan that we all knew that Spassky was going for. E5, counter-striking in the center of the board. So it does make a lot of sense to bring the knight back to b3, right? We've already kind of established that he's not doing much here. This square is covered. You're not really attacking this guy. There's no reason why you would want to control d2 going backwards. So the best thing to do is kind of to exchange it for the bishop on c6, which is pressuring our pawn on b4. And now here, black has two ways of capturing. You could go bc6 or you could go knight c6. Now bc6 might seem like you're weakening the pawn structure, but knight c6, the commentator very astutely points out that this would be pointless, as it would leave the b5 and d5 squares in white's hands. So this pawn on c6 does a fantastic job of defending key central squares, which otherwise the knight might find very attractive. So hold your horses. bc6 is the way to go here. Which one is Capablanca? Capablanca, ay Dios santo. Capablanca. I skipped that era. I jumped directly to Karpov. Oh, thank you for the follow, Momo Meow. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. No, this isn't Capablanca. Listen, get with the program. Okay, it's Karpov with white, Spassky with black, and we're gonna be looking at Karpov's games for at least a while. There's other, like, I have Fisher's collection of games. You can maybe look at that one. But listen, don't interrupt me, okay? I'm kidding. And here, f takes e5. All right. F takes e5. And here, an interesting move. A very interesting move. I'll leave it here for a second. I'm trying to figure out what the heck is the point of this move. So white took on e5. I keep on doing the same thing. White took on e5, right? So we have these weak pawns. Black also has this weak pawn that you got to worry about eventually. But I guess the point of this move, of this next move, is, I guess, goes hand in hand with this maneuver, rook f2, okay? How do I get rid of that arrow? There we go. Oh, sorry. I mean, I have... Tengo juegos de capa blanca también. We could see those too. I think this era is more interesting though. El maestro, saludos, saludos. Estamos viendo Karpov contra un fish que le decían Spassky. Okay, white goes Queen F1. And the machine immediately recognizes the point behind this move. So Mr. Grandmaster Marin states, the queen immediately uses the square cleared by the rook. Isn't that amazing? So rook f2 is not only to defend c2. So we see the knight's gone, right? So the knight's gone from this square, so it's not defending c2 anymore. And so we have the rook here, which allows the queen to come to f1. This is amazing play. Her main intention is to get to c4, and on the way exert some pressure on the f file. So we have this, I guess, in conjunction with this, because we've taken here, opening up the file. I guess we're also pressuring here and threatening maybe to bring a rook to the d file. So this is a pretty deep move, okay? So Spassky, seeing that the d file has been cleared, goes queen c8, a move that makes a lot of sense. And as the program very astutely points out, knight g4 is now a threat, which ideally we would not like to give up this bishop pair, especially the one of the dark squares, because the dark squares can be sort of kind of weak, but also black has some potential weaknesses here. So this dark squared bishop is key. So it's seeing that queen c8 not only gets out of the way of any potential rook attacks, right? Also prepares knight g4, threatening these two. So, and seeing that, h3. Simple chess. Very simple chess. No need to complicate matters. And Mr. Marin says, as we will see later, Karpov is not against the exchange of his light-squared bishop for the black king's knight. But he will do it under optimal circumstances after inducing a kingside weakness and without allowing the active queen g4. So Karpov is like, I don't want to exchange quite yet. No tengo ni idea. No tengo ni idea si esta es la partida de caballo B1. Déjame ver. Sí. Maestro, estás al día con las partidas clásicas. Esta es la partida de caballo B1. Knight d7. Regrouping the pieces a little bit. Yeah, maybe at some point preparing bishop c5. And a very bothersome move, which makes a lot of sense here. Bishop g4. So the bishop's not doing much on f3. And of course, Karpov just doesn't want to let Spassky organize his pieces like he's just playing by himself. So it goes bishop g4 to kind of bother this plan a little bit of the regrouping of bishop c5 or knight c5, because it's currently pinned. So of course Spassky says, I want to get that bishop out of there because I want to continue with my plan. But our commentator points out that h5, although it makes sense, it weakens this square somewhat. So if the queen ever comes to c4, there's a dangerous pin, which could place a target on this guy over here. And of course, if we just retreat the bishop, our move bishop g4 wouldn't have made a lot of sense. And like we stated earlier, said that Karpov didn't mind exchanging the light squared bishop for the knight, just in circumstances. Because let's be honest, with this central pawn over here, this bishop is kind of not the best. Strong bishop is a dark squared bishop, so he'll gladly exchange that. which he does. Queen takes d7. And then queen c4. We see his plan coming to fruition. Very logical play here by Karpov. That's what I love about this guy's game, man. His play is very logical. Hard to emulate, but once you see it, it makes a lot of sense. Bishop h4, I guess, just trying to be annoying. It makes sense. I mean, black, or white rather, has some weaknesses along the dark squares here, so the bishop isn't doing much on e7. The original plan of exchanging the bishop for c5 is impossible anymore. So just trying to find a better square for this guy. But Karpov goes rook d2. I guess it's a little victory, right? Because you got some pressure off of the f-file. But the rook is also very good on d2. And here again we see, maybe before in this position, where are we? Move 22, right? Maybe in this position, it didn't make a lot of sense. Rook f2 to defend the c2 pawn. But once we see what his plan was, here it makes all the sense in the world. The pawn's never hanging because the rook is on the second rank over here. So, not only I think is it great great ability to foresee, I think it's just great opening preparation here by Karpov, really understanding the system and how it works. So rook d2, you got to move your queen. Queen e7 makes sense, again playing along the dark squares. And maybe setting up an exchange of major pieces along the d-file. Okay, now here. Here there's an obvious move and a not so obvious move. Let's leave it here for a second. Looks like queen e7 at first sight might be a blunder. Here, okay, so Karpov played rook f1. And it says the rook's circling moves create a strong aesthetical impression. But as we will see, the rook stands better on d2 than on d1 for practical reasons too. Of course, he had bishop c5, which is a very good move. Of course, bishop c5, queen g5, rook a1 with a huge advantage. But here's the key thing here. So queen g5, you might think that after bishop c5 you're winning an exchange, but this is an important tempo on the rook that is currently hanging. So when you defend it, you have time to move the rook on f8 out of the way. This, yeah, it looks like, I mean, it looks really bad for black. And the commentator goes on to say that it is remarkable that Karpov refrained from playing bishop c5. It said that had he played this way, the game would have been less instructive. As the most beautiful part starts on the next move. So, of course, rook f1. And just to get out of any problems with a potential bishop c5, rook f d8 makes a lot of sense. Exchange some pieces off the board, contesting the d-file. f7 is defended. It's not easy for white to put more pressure on there. Since you can't play rook f2 because the bishop is here covering that square, right? So it makes sense. It makes sense. And here, Karpov comes up with a brilliant solution to the position, which I'm going to just leave it here for a couple minutes. Because this is hard to come up with. You might look at this position. Spassky probably thought that he was doing okay here. I mean, sure, you have a weakness on c6, but the knight on b4 is pretty strong. It's annoying, and it's doing a very good job of defending c6. So you're going to exchange the major pieces. And white himself has a weakness on e4. There's no obvious way of how you can improve the position here. If you look closely, this queen is doing a good job on c4, pressuring c6, putting some pressure along the diagonal here. It's a pretty optimal square for the queen, right? Then you have this rook, same thing, rook's on an open file, putting some good pressure here on f7. It's going to be hard to find a more active square for the rook than f1. Same thing with this guy, he's contesting the open d file. He really can't go anywhere else where he would be more active. And same thing with this bishop. This bishop is doing a pretty good job here on e3, defending all the dark squares along his camp. He's got a good diagonal here. He's got a good diagonal there. Now, pointing all this out, the only guy who's really not contributing anything at all is the knight. The knight can't jump because of what we pointed out earlier. This pawn's doing a great job defending the central squares. It makes no sense to go here because from this square you could only go here, here, or here, and all those squares are defended by the pawn and the bishop, so there's really nothing you could do there. Yeah, think to yourself, so where might this knight be more useful? And the answer is, well, there's a few answers here. This square would be nice, this square would be nice, this square would be nice, and this square would be nice. And from where can you reach all these squares? You can reach all these squares from b1. And this move was annotated with 2 exclamation marks. Is this another ad? It is. Wells Fargo Visa card. Cool. Why am I getting all these ads today? What's going on? Brilliant move, knight b1. You really have to understand how chess works to pull something like that off. It's crazy how good this move is. Knight b1, double exclamation. So white is not against the exchange of one rook, but he invites black to speed the knight's regrouping to f3 or b3 via d2. The knight did not The knight did not do much on c3, and besides, now white is ready to deprive black of his main trump, his previously stable knight on b4. So not only are we improving the knight on b1, but now we are preparing c3. And as we mentioned earlier, this knight does a pretty good job here on b4 at defending c6 and making contact with some important squares here in white's camp. And he points out that after rook fd1, it only justifies black's plan, and here he gives a potential line, which is rook takes, and bishop g5. And with the exchange of all these pieces, it says that this solves most of black's problems. So Karpov obviously saw that, understood that, and did not allow that. Knight b1. What a move. How do you respond to that? Queen b7. Now queen b7 makes sense. I guess the main point is that you need to find a way to defend c6, right? Because c3 is coming. And you don't want to leave that pawn hanging. So c3 is coming, you need to defend c6. And here, Karpov comes up with another brilliant move. This dude, man, I don't know. You get ads too? Well, not from Twitch, but from streaming the music, yeah. So Karpov here. He goes king h2. It's marked as a good move. Okay. King h2 because you want to prevent bishop g3. Or that's at least what Karpov wants to do. Well, my question is, why can't you go c3? Does the order matter here? Like if you go c3 first, knight a6, king h2. Maybe because c3 you can't go bishop g3. Interesting. Interesting. Why not c3 first? Hey, there's like rook takes, knight a6. You could go king h2 then. Maybe the order doesn't matter much. Maybe Karpov is just being fancy here. But I guess we all agree that the bishop on g3 would be extremely annoying. This is another typical Karpov move. The king also participates in the global plan by preventing bishop g3 once the knight reaches f3. So king g7. There's not a lot of useful moves that black could come up with. And now c3. And knight a6. Now the other option here was rook takes d2. And black doesn't really... Oh, what did I do here? Knight a6. Yeah, black doesn't really achieve much with it. So you have rook takes d2, knight takes d2, and knight c2. But you just go bishop c5, knight e1. The knight's just like roaming all over the place, kind of crazy. Knight d3. Knight d3, of course, if you take on d3, right, then this guy, if you do this, then this guy's hanging. And you're also applying pressure here. So, interesting move. Of course, it doesn't matter. Queen takes d3, queen takes b3, queen d6. Putting important pressure on e5 and on c6. Queen e6, the only way to defend both attack pawns. We have takes, rook d1, with the one ending due to the much better structure and the active rook. Yeah, this should be pretty straightforward to win. Black's position is very difficult here. Yeah, Karpov probably wouldn't have too much of a problem converting that. Oh, my battery. This battery on this thing doesn't last too long. Is that plugged in? Oh, there we go. Now we're plugged in. Alright, so yeah, so rook takes d2 really doesn't solve any problem. So knight a6. Rook e2. Jesus. This guy's just bringing them all out. Rook e2. Since black did not wish to take on d2, the rook finally clears the way for the knight. So yeah, getting the rook out of the way so that the knight can come to d2, maybe f3, maybe b3. I think b3 doesn't make a lot of sense now, right? Because c5 is covered by the knight. But yeah, f3 and g5. g5 looks like a very, very critical square, like hitting f7. Spassky replies with rook f8. Makes some sense. It says a rook d7, which is the other option here to not only cover the pawn on f7, defending it this way, but also maybe trying to double eventually on the d file. It doesn't make a big difference. And he gives a possible line here with g3, bishop d8, right? Maybe trying to come around to maneuver to b6, maybe. Put some pressure there on the f file with rook ef2, f6, knight d2, and you can't take on b2 because of what? Yes, because of knight b3. After queen a3, knight c5, and the queen will soon be trapped. Knight takes c5. Let's see, bishop takes c5. And it's game over. Queen has nowhere to go, right? Knight takes. Bishop takes. Where can she go? You can't go here. You can't go out that way. You can't go out this way. You can't come here, 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 or there. It's game over. Pretty line, that one. So, this position is difficult for black. Weak pawns here. This bishop now is poorly placed, and I guess a good idea would have been to bring it here, but there's so much pressure on f7, you had to go f6. And the knight's just going to march forward, either f3, h4, or b3, c5. Yeah, this is a difficult position to play. You're just going to get squeezed here. Rook f8. Knight d2, continuing with his plan of bringing the knight to a better square. He's gunning for f3, okay? And Spassky decides to go with bishop d8 with the same plan that we saw before. So black decides to consolidate his king side with f7, f6. So with the pawn on h7, this might have been a better option. Yeah, but now we see how when you have to play f6 with the pawn h5, we were talking about earlier about that weakness on g6, it could tal vez caballo f3, mueve caballo por e5. ¿En qué momento? Oh, yeah. Sí, caballo f3 pone mucha presión. Yeah, knight f3, lots of pressure on e5 too. Which I guess you have to plan for. Yeah, it looks like black is running out of options here. Like, you have to go bishop d8 and f6. So, yeah, la presión es muy fuerte sobre 5 también, no me había fijado. Yeah. So, where were we? Bishop d8. Now here, black... Oh my goodness. Where am I? Black pieces have some options. Mainly, not that one. Rook a e8. In that case, Grandmaster Marin suggests knight f3. So rook e8 makes sense, right? Defending e5 is just what we were talking about earlier, how knight f3 puts some strong pressure here on this guy. So then bishop d8 and rook d2. This is Botvinnik here. Is this like a line that he gave? Was he still playing in 1974? When was he world champion? 70... 70 what? Maestro, ¿qué año quedó Bob Vini campeón? ¿76? I have to look that up. sure when Botvinnik was champion. Botvinnik was champion from 48 to 63. Is he still playing in 74? I didn't know he was still playing in 74. Okay. Rook d2. Then it has knight b8 and b4 with a clear advantage for white. Maybe black could still hold on here. I mean, because the position doesn't look good for black, but white still has to break through. So this could have been a better option for black instead of playing bishop d8. Try to bring this rook in to the game, and only then playing bishop d8. So here Karpov continues with the plan. If you guessed knight f3, you guessed correctly. And now it says black has to play f6. There's no way that you can avoid f6. And he gives some lines here. So let's say that you try, because e5 is being attacked. Let's just say that you try bishop c7, right? Knight g5. What are you going to do with f7? Big problem. Yeah, I'm guessing like if you go back to bishop d8, you have rook f2, right? Like say for instance, bishop d8. Trying to think if there's like anything with knight e6 check and bishop h6. Doesn't seem necessary though, does it? You could probably just go rook f2. And I guess takes and takes. And this is really bad. The dark squares are just destroyed. So yeah, bishop c7, knight g5 is just clearly winning. You have another option here, which is playing bishop e7 with the idea that if you take on e5, maybe you have bishop d6, right? Trying to complicate matters a little bit. That should still be very bad. Well, you don't have to go into these complications. You could just play rook e f2, putting very uncomfortable pressure on f7 once again. And your last option is bishop f6, which in that case you have rook e f2 followed by knight g5. And this is just everything. Oh, how beautiful his queen is on c4. Like the queen moved twice. It went from d1. It went from here to here to here. And it just stayed there all game. Unbothered. Undisturbed. Just exerting brutal pressure on f7. What a way to play, right? So simple. Yet so difficult. f6. And now Karpov comes up with yet another blow to black's hopes. So interestingly enough, if we remember, in this position, let me get all these arrows out of the way. Huh? These arrows are bothering us. There's got to be a better way to clear the arrows, but I haven't figured it out yet. In this position, Karpov had played rook e2 to clear the way for the knight, so that the knight could come to d2 and f3. Now, fast forward 2 moves to this position. Guess what? The knight is already on f3. So what does that mean? This rook here is not doing much. We don't need it really to defend c2 anymore, so we could think about activating it, right? So since the knight already made it here, doesn't need d2 anymore. Karpov goes and he plays the rook back to d2. That says the rook once again moves along the second rank after the knight has reached f3. The d2 square is designed for the rook, of course. This understanding that black is almost completely tied down here, and he just takes his time to continue improving the position little by little, little by little, little by little. It's just great. All right. Bishop e7 is the move that Spassky opted for. Well, Spassky was putting out some pretty good resistance here. Karpov wrote in his notes that after bishop e7, he had a moment of disappointment because he could not find a forced win, as he did against the other moves. But then he just continued with his plan. The other moves being, first, you had in this position knight b8, and Karpov said that after, well, if this is just brutal, I'm just going to leave this here for a little bit because this is pretty nasty as well. Actually, I'm trying to figure it out. Oh, okay, I see. So after knight b8, trying to reroute the knight. I don't get what would motivate Spassky to play knight b8 though. Knight b8 doesn't seem like a move that would make sense here. But anyway, if black were to play knight b8, Karpov has a pretty nasty move here. When knight g5. Threatening, of course, knight e6 check and winning the exchange. And you might think, so what happens if you take here? So what I'm guessing is takes. You could go takes, and takes on d8 check. And again, the queen is just it's absolutely, I mean, you could go, I don't even know what the heck you could go. Like if you go to e7, there's bishop takes g5, and it's but that's checkmate. Yeah, that's checkmate. So you can't do that. If you go here, you have this, and you'd have to come here, and I guess this is simple enough, right? Queen h8 check, queen h7, bishop takes g5. Simple enough. The machine's giving, maybe there's some sort of a mate after queen takes e5. Is this mate? If you go to h4, it's g3 mate. If you come here, I guess it's queen f4. Yes, either, everything's winning. So knight b8 just doesn't work at all. The other option here that Karpov had seen was rook c8, after which obviously rook fd1 is more than enough. You're invading here on d7 with check, winning the queen. Like, what do you can't go rook f7 because then you're hanging this guy. Alright, I did a mess of arrows here. But yeah. Rook d7 is coming. You can't stop rook d7. And that's pretty much game. But after bishop e7, you don't have knight g5. And you don't have... I guess you have rook fd1, right? But Karpov goes here for another pretty nasty move. This guy, man, he just does not let up. Bishop or queen e6. Yep, threatening rook d7. So you kind of have to go by force rook a d8, right? Finally, this rook that hadn't done anything all game comes into play, but it might be a little late for that. So yeah, rook d8. Threatening on d2. Thank you, chess space, for pointing that out. There's got to be some way I could get rid of those arrows, and I hate them. Karpov calmly exchanges, and Spassky takes with the bishop on d8. So why not with the rook? What the heck happened here? If you take with the rook, oh, this is another brutal move. Now this is just a straight up tactic. And now we see just what a beautiful job the knight's doing here on f3, and how well it's coordinating with the queen and with the rook to exert pressure here on f7. You have to be a certain level to see this, so I'm going to see the whole plan. I guess the movement itself isn't too hard, but here this knight takes e5. There's a serious threat against f7. Of course, if you take f takes e5, there's rook f7 check. And this is just, it's game. It's a crushing attack. Everything is just coming in. You're losing material. This is going to be mate and few. This is really bad. So that's why you can't go rook d8, knight takes e5. The line still goes on for a little bit. Queen c7. It's not that simple, because after queen c7, your boy here is pinned. So you really can't move the knight. However, white has queen f7 check, king h8, and here is another tactic. Pretty simple. Again, we see the knight being the key guy here in all these variations. You might think, well, knight's pinned. He's got nowhere to go. He will be taken. But queen takes e7 solves all those problems. So what happens if queen takes e7? Well, I have knight takes g6 check. Removes the queen from the diagonal, so it's not pinned any longer. So I guess after queen takes e7, you can maybe try, yeah, you could try queen takes e5 check. You have to exchange the queen, rook f6. And this is pretty much game. You're already up an extra pawn, and you're about to go up another pawn. This guy's weak. This bishop is a lot better than this knight, which is doing Lord knows what on a6. Yeah, so that variation, you're basically forced here to take with the bishop, and even then, simple move. So if we do the exercise that we did before of just looking at all of white's pieces and seeing, well, which one can be improved, the knight so far now is finally doing an excellent job on f3. The bishop has only moved once and has been pretty key on e3, but the rook has a place where it could be more active. Rook d1. Interesting notes here. Grandmaster Jan Timman writes that while Karpov was thinking, the grandmasters that were present in the analysis room worked out some complicated lines starting with knight takes e5, queen c7, and bishop f4. But after seeing rook d1, they admitted that Karpov's solution was not only simpler, but it was better. It's just simple chess. Rook d1. What do you do with that threat? So now it makes sense to go knight b8, which is what Spassky replied. Controlling the d7 square. And this game is coming to an end pretty soon. Pretty soon. And this is pretty much like the same exercise again. Like, what can we do? So the knight just left a6. So what squares did it abandon? It abandoned c5 and b4. Not that it was doing anything in b4, but it really abandoned c5. So Karpov is like, well, wait a minute, now I could continue improving my position, continue activating more pieces. I will play bishop c5. The rook obviously cannot come here because the queen will take. And if the rook comes to f7, well, the rook is the sole defender of the bishop. That would just allow rook takes d8. Now, incredibly enough, rook h8. And Karpov delivers a crushing blow that ends the game immediately. I'll just leave it there for a little bit. What is a crushing blow? The crushing blow is sí, torre por d8 y alfil 7. Dos chocolatitos para usted. Rook takes d8, double exclamation mark. And the point being, Spassky just resigned here. He said, I've had enough. No more getting trounced on for today. But the point is, after rook takes d8, bishop e7. Absolutely brutal. Attacking this guy, attacking that guy. This guy's coming in, cutting off the queen. You really don't have any good squares. And here we see also how awesome this move is on h2. King h2, just getting out of the way of any intermediate checks or anything, you know, whatever nonsense that black might have. Karpov just tucked away his king on h2, avoiding all problems. And this is just game over. What a beautiful game. Absolutely beautiful game. This is a good example of, you know, how the coordination between the pieces and how important it is to come up with these long-term plans and all that sort of stuff. And that exercise of improving your worst placed piece, which is pretty much what this whole game was about. I have to go a little bit more in depth with an engine to see exactly where this went wrong for Spassky, because he didn't make like any really clear mistakes, which is what's even more impressive about this game. Like, Spassky played a pretty logical game. It made sense, and even then he just got wiped off the board. Speaks to how powerful Karpov was. Aquí, en el 74 Spassky había perdido ya con Fischer, ¿verdad? Eso fue en el 72. Porque Spassky todavía era uno de los mejores del mundo. Yeah, I think Spassky had already lost. What a game. What a game. Correcto, no se ve un error definitivo. 72, sí, sí. Yeah, it's so impressive. Because Spassky's play made sense the whole way. Some weird moves, maybe queen b7 was a little bit weird. But like, what are you going to play if not, you know? Yeah, Karpov was just absolutely brutal. Well, that was our game of the day. Karpov versus Spassky. Candidates, I believe it was a match. Candidates match in Leningrad, 1970.